Michigan, June, 1945. Generaloberst Kurt Dittmar, one of Nazi Germany's highest-ranking captured officers, stands inside the Ford Willow Run plant, watching B-24 Liberator bombers roll off the assembly line. One complete bomber every 63 minutes. Dittmar has commanded armies. He has planned operations involving millions of men. He has studied logistics his entire career, but nothing in his experience prepared him for what he is witnessing. After 3 hours of silent observation, American intelligence officers ask for his assessment. Dittmar removes his monocle, cleans it slowly, and speaks a single sentence that would be recorded in classified reports and repeated for decades. "Now I understand why we lost the war. You were not fighting a military campaign, you were waging industrial extermination." This is the story of what happened when Nazi generals, men who had terrorized Europe, came face to face with the arsenal of democracy and finally understood the true nature of American power. The program began in spring 1945 as American forces pushed deeper into Germany. U.S. Army intelligence had captured dozens of high-ranking German officers, including field marshals, generals, and senior staff officers. These weren't just soldiers. They were men who had planned Germany's greatest victories and managed its war economy. American interrogators realized they possessed a unique opportunity. These German officers had spent years trying to understand American industrial capacity from intelligence reports and captured equipment. What if America showed them the reality? What if they saw with their own eyes the factories that had buried the Third Reich in steel? The decision to conduct factory tours for captured German generals was controversial. Some American officers argued it was inappropriate, possibly even a security risk. Why show the enemy, even defeated enemies, the extent of American capabilities? But the intelligence community had different priorities. They wanted to document German reactions, to understand what the enemy had known and not known about American production. More importantly, with the Cold War already beginning, American planners wanted these German officers, many of whom would return to positions of influence in occupied Germany, to carry back undeniable proof of American industrial supremacy. The selection process identified German generals who had held positions where they would have made strategic decisions based on industrial capacity assessments. Men like Generaloberst Kurt Dittmar, who had served as the Wehrmacht's official military spokesman and strategic analyst, or General der Panzertruppe Heinz Guderian, the father of German armored warfare doctrine, who understood better than most how logistics determined tactical possibilities, or General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring, who had commanded in Italy and understood the crushing weight of American material superiority from painful personal experience. The first tours occurred in May 1945, just days after Germany's surrender. American officers escorted groups of captured German generals to aircraft manufacturing plants, tank factories, shipyards, and steel mills. The tours were carefully documented. Stenographers recorded every comment. Photographers captured reactions. Intelligence analysts studied facial expressions, body language, and the questions the Germans asked or notably didn't ask. What emerged from these tours was a consistent pattern of shock, denial, and final acceptance that Germany never had a chance. The Willow Run plant outside Detroit became the most famous tour destination. Built by Ford Motor Company specifically to mass-produce B-24 bombers, Willow Run was the largest factory building in the world when completed in 1942. The main building was 3.25 million square feet with a final assembly line nearly 1 mile long. At peak production in 1944, the plant employed 42,000 workers operating in 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They produced 650 B-24 bombers per month, one every 63 minutes. When Generaloberst Dittmar entered Willow Run, he was initially quiet, professional, taking notes, observing with the careful eye of a trained military analyst. American guides explained the process: raw materials entering one end, workers assembling components at hundreds of stations, partially completed aircraft moving down the line, final assembly at the end, and finished bombers rolling out to the airfield. The guides showed production charts demonstrating that Willow Run alone produced more heavy bombers in 1944 than all of German industry combined. Dittmar stopped taking notes. He asked to see the production figures again. The Americans showed him official production records, numbers that could be verified. Willow Run,
8,685 B-24 bombers built between 1942 and 1945. For comparison, German produced roughly 40,000 aircraft of all types during the same period, across hundreds of factories, many of which were destroyed by the very bombers Willow Run built. Dittmar requested to see the factory floor. The Americans obliged. Standing on a catwalk above the assembly line, Dittmar watched for 2 hours without speaking. Workers below, most of them women, many of them former housewives or farmers with no industrial experience before the war, were assembling the most complex military aircraft in production. The precision required for aircraft assembly, the coordination of thousands of parts, the quality control necessary for military aviation, all of it was happening at a pace that seemed impossible. Every 63 minutes, another complete bomber. The psychological impact on German generals who toured Willow Run was profound and consistent. These were men who understood manufacturing. Germany was an industrial powerhouse. German factories built excellent aircraft, superior tanks, sophisticated weapons, but German production was artisanal compared to American mass production. German factories built aircraft the way craftsmen built precision machines, carefully, slowly, with skilled workers performing specialized tasks. American factories built aircraft the way Ford built cars. Assembly line processes, interchangeable parts, semi-skilled workers performing repetitive tasks, and relentless optimization for speed. General der Flieger Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top fighter aces and commander of the Luftwaffe fighter force, toured several American aircraft plants in June 1945. Galland had spent the war years trying to defend German cities against American bomber streams. He knew intimately the cost of American air power, but seeing where that power originated left him shaken. In his post-war memoirs, Galland wrote, "We knew America was producing many aircraft. We assumed they were sacrificing quality for quantity. We were wrong. They achieved both. Their factories produced excellent aircraft in quantities we could not imagine, let alone match."
The tank factories proved equally devastating to German confidence. The Chrysler tank arsenal in Detroit, designed specifically to mass-produce M4 Sherman tanks, operated on principles that violated everything German tank manufacturers understood. German tank production emphasized individual vehicle quality, hand-fitted components, and complex designs that required skilled machinists. The Panther and Tiger tanks were engineering masterpieces. They were also expensive, time-consuming to build, and impossible to produce in American quantities. The Chrysler arsenal built Sherman tanks on an assembly line modeled after automobile production. General Major Hans von Luck, who commanded armored units on both fronts, toured the facility in July 1945. American guides walked him through the production process. Stamped armor plates rather than cast components where possible. Standardized parts that fit any Sherman variant. Simple, reliable mechanical systems that prioritized maintainability over performance. The result was a tank that German Tigers could destroy in combat but could never defeat strategically, because America built 10 Shermans for every Tiger Germany produced. Von Luck asked how long it took to build a Sherman. The answer, 6 hours from raw materials to finished tank rolling off the assembly line. He asked how many the factory could produce. The answer, 1,500 per month from this one factory alone. Von Luck did the mathematics. In the time it took German to build one Tiger tank, approximately 6 months in 1944, American factories built 9,000 Sherman tanks. The numbers made tactical excellence irrelevant. Germany could win every tank battle and still lose the war, which is exactly what happened. The naval construction tours might have been most shocking of all. Captured German naval officers visited shipyards that were building destroyers in under 3 months and Liberty cargo ships in under 2 weeks. 2 weeks to build a 10,000-ton ocean-going ship. German shipyards required 18 months to build comparable vessels. Admiral Otto Schneewind, who had served as chief of the Naval War Staff, toured the Kaiser shipyards in California and watched welders working in shifts around the clock, assembling prefabricated hull sections into complete ships with a speed that seemed physically impossible. The Liberty ship program exemplified American industrial philosophy. The ships weren't beautiful, they weren't fast, they weren't sophisticated, but they were good enough to carry cargo across oceans, and American shipyards built 2,710 of them in 4 years. German U-boats sank ships by the hundreds, and it didn't matter because American shipyards built ships faster than U-boats could sink them. Schneewind calculated the numbers and realized that Germany's submarine warfare strategy had been defeated not by better anti-submarine tactics, but by overwhelming production capacity that made sinking ships strategically meaningless.
The steel mills and raw material processing facilities completed the picture. German generals toured factories in Pittsburgh, Gary, Cleveland, seeing blast furnaces and rolling mills that dwarfed anything in Germany. American steel production in 1944 exceeded 80 million tons. German production peaked at 30 million tons. American aluminum production, critical for aircraft, was nearly 10 times German output. The raw material disparity meant that even if German factories matched American efficiency, which they couldn't, Germany would still lose because America had access to resources Germany could only dream about. Generaloberst Alfred Jodl, chief of operations for the German Armed Forces High Command, was one of the most senior Nazis to tour American factories before his trial at Nuremberg. Jodl had been responsible for strategic planning for the entire German military. He had studied intelligence reports on American industry. He had made decisions based on assessments of American production capacity. After touring 3 factories in 10 days, Jodl told his American escorts, "Everything we thought we knew was wrong, not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. We believed America was wealthy but soft, capable of producing consumer goods but not military equipment in quantity. This belief cost us the war." The questions German generals asked during these tours revealed their growing comprehension of how badly they had miscalculated. They asked about worker training. How long to train an aircraft assembly worker? Answer: 2 to 6 weeks. German skilled aircraft workers required 2 to 3 years of training. They asked about supply chains. How do you get materials to factories this large? Americans showed them rail networks, highway systems, and logistics operations that moved millions of tons of materials daily with clockwork precision. They asked about damage from bombing. Surely German raids had disrupted production? Americans explained that German bombers never reached these factories, and even if they had, production was distributed across dozens of facilities, making strategic bombing of American industry essentially impossible. The psychological impact of these tours extended beyond individual German officers. American intelligence compiled detailed reports based on the factory visits, including direct quotes, behavioral observations, and analytical assessments. These reports circulated through military and civilian leadership, providing validation for industrial strategies that had won the war. More importantly, they documented for history the moment when Germany's military elite confronted undeniable evidence of their defeat's true nature. Some German generals maintained composure better than others. Generalfeldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt, elderly and aristocratic, toured a tank factory with apparent indifference, making few comments. But his aide later reported that von Rundstedt remarked privately, "We were fighting the 20th century with 19th century methods. The Americans were waging industrial warfare, and we were still thinking about military glory. There is no glory in being buried under mountains of steel." The cultural dimension emerged in many German responses. Nazi ideology had emphasized will, fighting spirit, racial superiority, and military tradition as decisive factors in warfare. The factory tours demonstrated that modern warfare was decided by production capacity, logistics, and industrial efficiency. Ideology was irrelevant. Tradition was irrelevant. The side that could build more weapons, move more supplies, and replace losses faster would win, regardless of soldier quality or tactical brilliance. This realization was intellectually devastating to officers raised in the Prussian military tradition that emphasized honor, courage, and operational excellence. Several German generals specifically mentioned American workers during their factory tours. They expressed surprise that so many factory workers were women, African Americans, and recent immigrants, groups that Nazi ideology had deemed inferior. Yet these workers were building aircraft, tanks, and ships that had defeated the Wehrmacht. The cognitive dissonance was visible. Nazi racial theories predicted that a diverse, multicultural society like America would be weak, divided, inefficient. The factories proved the opposite. American diversity was a strength, providing massive labor pools that Germans' narrow ideology could never match. The efficiency observations particularly troubled German industrial experts. American factories used time and motion studies, ergonomic workstation designs, and continuous process improvements that squeezed maximum productivity from every worker and every hour. German factories relied more on skilled craftsmen working traditional methods. American workers might be less individually skilled, but American processes were vastly more efficient. The result was productivity per worker that German factories couldn't approach. A German aircraft worker might be more skilled than an American counterpart, but the American worker produced 3 times as many aircraft because the American system was designed for maximum output. General Major Heinz Guderian, in his tour of the Chrysler tank arsenal, spent significant time studying the logistics systems that fed the production lines. He observed materials arriving by rail and truck, components moving from supplier factories to final assembly, finished tanks being loaded for shipment overseas. The coordination required to keep production running without interruption impressed him. More than the production speed, German logistics had been a constant struggle, with shortages, bottlenecks, and transportation problems plaguing military production. American logistics appeared effortless, almost automatic. Guderian concluded that American industrial success wasn't primarily about technology or worker skill. It was about systems thinking, treating the entire production and distribution process as an integrated whole rather than separate problems. The tours also revealed what German intelligence had failed to understand about American industrial conversion. Before Pearl Harbor, American factories produced consumer goods, automobiles, refrigerators, radios. After Pearl Harbor, those same factories converted to military production with remarkable speed. The Willow Run plant was built from nothing to full production in 18 months. The companies that built sewing machines before the war built machine guns during the war. The systems and expertise used for civilian mass production transferred seamlessly to military mass production. Germany had built its military industry over decades. America built comparable capacity in 2 years by converting existing industrial infrastructure. Some German reactions bordered on denial. A few generals insisted the production numbers must be exaggerated, that American guides were showing them the same aircraft multiple times, that the statistics were propaganda. These generals were shown production records, inventory logs, and shipping manifests. They were taken to airfields where hundreds of new bombers sat awaiting delivery to combat units. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. America had produced these quantities. Germany had faced this industrial tsunami, and Germany had lost exactly as these numbers predicted. The most poignant moments came when German generals realized the futility of their own efforts. General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring, who had commanded German forces in Italy and fought brilliant defensive campaigns that slowed Allied advances for years, toured American factories and understood that his tactical successes were strategically meaningless. He had delayed American victory in Italy by months. During those months, American factories built thousands of additional tanks, tens of thousands of additional trucks, and hundreds of additional aircraft. His victories hadn't weakened America. They had given American factories more time to build more equipment. Every month he held out was a month American industrial advantage grew larger. The final common reaction was a kind of resigned respect. These German generals, even the most ideologically committed Nazis, recognized competence when they saw it. American mass production represented a different philosophy of warfare, but it was executed brilliantly. The workers were efficient, the managers were skilled, the systems were well designed, the results were undeniable. Several German officers, particularly those who would later work with American occupation authorities or contribute to West German reconstruction, expressed the view that they had learned valuable lessons from these factory tours. Germany had lost, but in losing, they had encountered an industrial system worth emulating. The historical significance of these factory tours extends beyond wartime psychology. The documented reactions of German generals provided primary source evidence for historians studying how industrial capacity determined World War II's outcome. The quotes, observations, and analytical assessments captured a unique moment. The defeated acknowledging not just that they lost, but understanding exactly why and how they lost. This understanding shaped post-war Germany's approach to reconstruction and eventual economic miracle, as German leaders applied lessons learned from American industrial efficiency to rebuilding their nation. The tours also served American strategic interest in the emerging Cold War. German officers who toured American factories returned to Germany and told others what they had seen. These stories spread through German military and civilian circles, creating a narrative of American industrial invincibility that discouraged any thought of resistance during occupation. More importantly, as these officers interacted with Soviet occupation forces in Eastern Germany, they could compare American industrial capacity with Soviet capabilities. This comparison made many Germans in the Soviet zone yearn for American or British occupation instead, contributing to Cold War political dynamics. In the final analysis, the factory tours achieved their intended purpose. They documented enemy understanding of American capabilities, provided intelligence on German wartime knowledge and decision-making, and created a record of the moment when military excellence confronted industrial reality. The captured Nazi generals who toured American factories in 1945 represented the best military minds Germany possessed. They had planned brilliant campaigns, won impossible victories, and fought with skill and determination. But standing in factories that built weapons faster than Germans could destroy them, they finally understood the truth that had eluded German leadership throughout the war. Generaloberst Kurt Dittmar's assessment after touring Willow Run became the most quoted reaction because it captured the essential realization. Germany wasn't defeated by better American generals, though American command was competent. Germany wasn't defeated by braver American soldiers, though American forces fought courageously. Germany was defeated by a nation that could convert its entire industrial economy to military production, achieve efficiency levels that made quantity and quality simultaneous goals rather than trade-offs, and sustain that production for years while suffering minimal disruption. The arsenal of democracy wasn't a propaganda slogan. It was an accurate description of American industrial capability. And when Nazi generals finally saw that arsenal firsthand, they understood why the swastika fell to the stars and stripes. Not because of military failure, but because they had challenged an industrial colossus that buried them in steel, crushed them under rubber and chrome, and drowned them in the endless output of factories that never stopped, never slowed, and never ran out of materials or workers or determination. They had started a war of production against an economy that treated warfare as a manufacturing problem to be solved with assembly lines and efficiency studies. And manufacturing problems, America knew how to solve.